hollow ache I know too well. "Do me, baby, do me hard," she moaned. "Not to me, but to my friend, right on our shared bed." The shock was visceral, a cold sweep through my veins as I stood frozen. I had been miles away on business. The distance, a trust I thought unbreakable. Yet here I was, home early, a surprise twisted into a nightmare. "Forever and ever I won't let you go," she had promised. Words now as empty as her love that betrayed me. This is my story. Enjoy watching. Mark had returned home earlier than he had promised his new wife after his business trip. He had been dating her for 4 years before asking her to marry him. That was 8 months ago, and he was eager to enjoy his well-deserved time off with his wife. Mark then heard unusual noises coming from their bedroom, and gently placed his baggage on the floor to surprise his wife, as he wondered what she was doing while he was out. Then something his wife said halted him in his tracks. "Do me hard, baby," his wife Lisa moaned from their bedroom in a house he had bought for her, with his own hard-earned money as she screwed someone else on his bed. "That's it. I want to feel you. There are 5 days until Mark returns home." Mark's fist tightened and rage flared across his face as he heard his wife's remarks. How long had she been walking out on him? How long has he been screwing her? After someone else was in there, he realized he needed to go get a blood test. He wasn't going to catch anything from his unfaithful wife, that was absolutely certain. His wrath boiled in his eyes as his own friend, whom he had covered for, pounded his wife from behind. He now understood the reason it was to screw his wife while he was working. The crashing sound of the vase breaking apart as it hit the side of his friend's head echoed through his bedroom. "Mark!" Lisa gasped in fear as Mark towered over them with a maddening expression in his eyes. "Baby, I can shut the hell up. Explain how long you've been screwing my friend. 1 month, 1 year? How long have we been dating for the past 4 years? You know what? I don't want to know. Here I was, working my butt off so we could have a good life. So what have you been doing? Screw that piece of trash behind my back? Tom, Dick, and Harry for all I know. Mark, you don't know anything. Get the heck out of my house and take that piece of junk," Mark yelled as he stormed from the room so his rage wouldn't get the better of him. "Mark, get the hell out." Mark scowled at his friend, noting the blood-soaked towel he held to the side of his head. "Despite our connection, you are not my friend. I do not want to see you here ever again, and you will hear from my lawyer," he stated, gazing at his deceitful wife. "I apologize. Take that shit and shove it up your ass, Lisa. If you didn't love me, then why did you marry me? You certainly enjoyed squandering my money, that's for sure. Your stuff will sit on the lawn. I recommend you acquire it before garbage pickup," Mark murmured before slamming the door in his soon-to-be ex-wife's face. That asshole can't even close a simple deal without someone holding his hand. A few months later, Mark was lying face down on his couch. Jack Daniels bottles lined the coffee table. Since his marriage ended, Mark has been intoxicated whenever he wasn't at work or driving anywhere. His life may have descended into a terrible pit of sorrow, but he was not an idiot. He had expected some of his family members to support him. The word got out, not one. Nobody was looking out for him. They all attempted to convince him that Lisa and Brad were happy and that he should be glad for them. However, they seemed to forget that their happiness was what caused his demise. But they chose to accept his point of view. They made terrible choices. Mark had recovered from his hangover after someone knocked on his front door. His hand wandered aimlessly as he searched for something to throw against the door to tell whoever was there to leave him alone. Sighing as the falling bottles aggravated his pounding headache, he turned his head when he heard the front door open. "It smells like a distillery inside, Jane," his sister, who was 3 years older than him, spoke as she entered his home. She had no right to enter the house without his permission, and he did not want any of them on his property. Her shovel leaned against the middle of her upper back, held in place by the nooks of her elbows, while she gripped her keys and pocketbook in her hand. "Jesus, Mark, you're not even clothed," Jane moaned as she stood at the left armrest wearing her bridesmaid gown. "Why the heck would I be? It's my first day off, and why the hell are you in my home?" Mark inquired, attempting to keep his voice low so as not to exacerbate his throbbing head. While staring at her outfit, Mark could comprehend why she wore such a professional outfit despite its terrible quality. Her cheeks heated up at his words. She had watched Mark move away from the family over the past year. Mark ceased his visits to the workplace except for mandatory meetings and scheduled clients. Instead, He worked from home and emailed his reports to them. Their parents didn't appear to bother him as long as his job wasn't sloppy. It hasn't, as evidenced by the lack of customer complaints. She knew he was handling his workload well, even if it appeared to her that he was no longer working as many hours for their company. Jane couldn't speak about it because he always met his monthly quota. Still, she missed her brother and the sound of his laughter filling the workplace after a long day. Her children, as well as his nephew and niece, missed him, especially because he did not show up for Thanksgiving and Christmas as he has done since they all moved out. Do you recall which day it is? Didn't Brad send you an invitation? Was this what it was about? Mark asked coldly, scratching his chin and hearing his 5-day stubble rustle as he sat up. I hurled it into the flames, Mark sighed. I got it, okay? But is this all? I'd rather go back to sleep now, thank you, Mark replied indifferently. Please come with me. Matt and Debbie miss you, Jane begged her brother. Next time bring them over. Otherwise, I'm not leaving this couch for a few more hours, Mark claimed. He was not going to the wedding. Mark, you can't. No, you do not. Mark said it coldly, his gaze directed at his sister. Fine, Mark. You are welcome to remain and drink yourself to death, Jane exclaimed, putting her hands up. I truly wish you would stop, she replied, glancing at the various bottles. By the time you discover Matt screwing a woman on your bed while you are covering for him, you will have an idea of my level of intoxication. Mark referred to her spouse as he poured a shot for himself. Otherwise, see yourself out of my home. Very good, Jane uttered before twisting on her heel, closing the door behind her and walking away. Sipping the dark whiskey, what they didn't know was that Mark had been seeking a new career, one that would take him far away from the city, this state, and his family, including her. However, given the state of the economy, finding work was difficult, and he worked just as hard in the field. Sure, he could sell almost anything. Nonetheless, he had years of experience with robots, and how many of those jobs actually came about? So he had to wait. He had to bide his time. When the opportunity arrived, and if the rate of pay matched his earnings, he would go, leaving nothing behind to entice him to return. Mark was cleaning his face after stepping out of his restroom. He knew he couldn't drive, he still felt the booze in his system, but his head wasn't pounding anymore, so he took comfort in that. He tossed his damp towel into the bathroom. He stopped using the master bedroom because it felt too filthy, for lack of a better phrase, after what had transpired. He could only suppose it had happened many more times. So the next day he took a friend's truck, which mercifully had no relation to his family, and drove out to a field in a fit of wrath. Regardless of how expensive the mattress was, he watched as the fire cleaned the taint from his house and the ashes soared to the sky. He continued to use the master bathroom despite its new use as a storage room. Otherwise, it was pointless to let all of the money he had spent on the house go to waste. Mark didn't spend any time in the adjoining room. He sat on the bed he had purchased in his underwear. He considered what he would do with the rest of the day. Obviously, he wasn't drinking because he had work the next day. He needed to be on top of his game to outperform his sibling in sales. A devilish smirk spread across his lips as the blinking light on his phone drew his attention. The light from his screen danced across his freshly shaven face, and he scowled when he saw 3 voicemails waiting for him, one from his mother, father, and ex-wife, as well as a half-dozen SMS. If it wasn't from their workplace phones, he didn't take his parents' calls, and he was certainly not going to listen to anything his ex-wife had to say. He didn't care if his parents were upset with him for not showing up, so he erased their texts, moaning as his mother called again as he was about to put them back on the nightstand beside his bed. What? No, hello, Mom? How was the wedding? What did I miss out on since I didn't attend? You know what? I'm too exhausted from this nonsense. If you want to whine, do so to Dad. Mark interrupted their conversation, tossing his phone aside. Oddly, he felt a slight sense of relief as he lifted his blue jeans, tilted his legs, and watched his phone creep across his bed, vibrating. He picked it up because he didn't recognize the number. Hello? Mark, do not hang up. What did she expect to happen when he heard her voice? God damn it, what? Mark yelled into the phone as his sister called immediately after his ex-wife. Don't take that tone with me, Robert, Jane hissed across the line. So what the heck are you calling me for? My reports are not due until the end of next week. My monthly quota has been met. What else is there to talk about? Mark inquired heatedly over the phone. Brad and Lisa would like to ask you something. It's quite significant." "You must listen to them," Jane insisted, encouraging her brother to reason. "I'm not interested in whatever they're up to." Mark gazed intently at his phone, emitting a sound akin to a handover. "Mark, you do not have to speak. Please listen, okay? I am pregnant, and I mean your brother and I, want you to be godfather," Lisa replied, hoping that this might mend the divide between him and Brad. "I refuse." "Think about it, Mark. Think about what you are saying," Jane's voice came through the telephone. Mark remained there for a while, listening to the background noise before realizing he was on speaker. Hearing his mom's and father's chatter as well as the rest of his family and Lisa's, he could only suppose. "I had given you my response," Mark stated. "I will not be held responsible for any devil offspring that she produces." The gasps that crossed the line brought an unpleasant grin to his lips. "Let another idiotic Mark of theirs handle that. Sure, it definitely won't be me." "Mark, that's cold, man," Brad replied as Lisa burst into tears. "It was nothing more than you taking advantage of my wife while I was out of town. The family is covering for your misdeeds." Mark wondered how many of Lisa's family members knew the truth. Then again, he didn't mind. He got his kicks in chuckling as he finished the call. He tossed it on the bed again and finished getting dressed, grabbing his keys once he'd put on his shoes and leaving his phone behind. He didn't want to deal with them as he drove to his getaway site, which he had discovered a few months ago. As he sat on his house porch with his legs supported up on the railing, twilight fell, and he watched his neighbor's regular activities. He had returned a little over an hour ago. He wasn't surprised by what he found when he arrived. It seems that his phone had practically blown up while he was away. His smile quickly faded as he saw the two cars come to a halt in front of his house. "What the hell now?" Mark murmured, as he saw his family streaming out of their automobiles, doors slamming in rage. "Where have you been?" his father inquired in a rage as he marched up his driveway. "Do you realize how worried we were?" his mother cut in, matching his father's stride. "So here I am." "Now you want to explain why you're stomping on my grass?" Mark inquired, wondering why Sister Kate was with his sister. "Hello, Mark," Kate replied softly, pushing her thick walnut-brown hair behind her ear. Her lovely blue eyes looked at him through the lenses of her glasses. When Mark first met her 5 years ago, she was just 18 when he and Lisa initially started dating. Some thought her slim figure was ill, but he found her alone in her house, attempting to hide her red, swollen eyes. He would try to cheer her up by telling her that not all boys were horses, and that someone would find her attractive. He sure did. Even if she was as slender as a beanpole. It still didn't matter to him, she was still a stunning woman. Based on what he could see over his parents' heads, Kate had matured into an adult physique over the last 5 years. "Hello, Kate." Mark smiled warmly and ignored his father's question. "I hope to see you at the wedding," Kate murmured, her cheeks flushing as she stared at him shyly. "Can you blame me for not attending?" Mark inquired, watching as she shook her head. "Do not disregard us, Mark," his father raised his voice. "Why not? You seem to dismiss my emotions all the time. See what happens when you push people who haven't done anything wrong. Praise those who have," Mark murmured, staring down at his father. "What would you have us do, Mark? Should we expel Brad from the family for his actions?" His father's remarks remained in his throat as he noticed the gleam in his son's eyes. "We understand your anger, son, and you have every right to be," his mother spoke, trying to maintain a neutral stance, a skill they had honed over the past year. "It has been over a year. Do you think it is time to forgive your brother?" "Not as long as he's alive." "Mark, take care of your mouth. This is my house and property. You arrived uninvited." "If you don't like how I talk on my own land, here's your car," Mark replied, pointing to his father's expensive sedan. "No one is keeping you here." "Mark, please," his mother begged with him. "Simply think about it. We miss you. It's different now that you're no longer a part of our lives. You've chosen a side. If you don't like the consequences of that decision, it's on you, not me. I'm the one who has been lost for years to a woman who never loved me. For 4 years she screwed around. Who knows what happened in my own home? However, everyone treats me as if I've broken all the rules, while everyone throws themselves at her and Brad's feet just to maintain the peace. So you know what? Screw the peace." "Fine, Mark. I hope you change your mind," his mother spoke, placing her hand on her husband's arm. "You're currently on a month-long leave. Do whatever you want. Go wherever you wish. Stay and sulk in this mansion for all I care, but at the end of the month I want you to join me at the Thanksgiving table." His father said this, hoping to push his son into forgetting his anguish. "What if I am not?" Mark questioned, calling his bluff. "Don't bother coming to Christmas dinner," his father said, turning on his heel and stomping off to his car, mumbling under his breath that he could no longer browbeat his youngest son the way he used to. "I hadn't planned on it," Mark remarked to his father's back. "Don't say that, son. Go somewhere, relax, and return home." "I would be delighted if you could join us for Thanksgiving dinner," his mother spoke, reaching out and gently squeezing his right palm before departing to join her husband in the car. "I suppose I won't be able to sway your mind with anything I say?" Jane inquired, staring up at her brother. "Not a bit," Mark responded, taking another sip of his beer. "All right, but Mark, you know we love you. Don't make us pick between you and Brad. You may think we have, but we're not on either side. We are equally unhappy about what Lisa and Brad did to you, but don't hold it against us. We want to keep the family together," Jane explained before turning around. "I'll wait in the car," she replied, her hand gently brushing Kate's forearm. Kate shyly approached his porch, hands behind her. "How have you been? Been better?" "Why?" Mark inquired, eventually coming off his porch to face her at eye level. Kate's heart fluttered, her cheeks flushed as Mark stood in front of her. Since he went out of his way to cheer her up whenever the boys her age harassed her on a daily basis, she watched from afar as her sister discarded a nice man, a man who cared for her while she was too greedy to recognize it. Now it was her turn. She wasn't about to pass up this opportunity. She was determined to prove to him that she was not like her sister and would always be loyal to him. She had kept herself free specifically for this opportunity. Sure, she's gone on dates and played around here and there. However, the portions that really mattered, she merely wanted to touch him, to be the only one to ever touch her body in such a way. "I was thinking she might operate the most fashionable women's underwear firm, not Victoria's Secret. A more elegant, inexpensive women's underwear manufacturer with materials as excellent as Victoria's Secret, just without the price. For the price of one of their embroidered bras, you could purchase one of her bra and pant sets, as well as a matching teddy." And so, being this close to him made her feel like a lovesick teenager who wished for the days when he would come over simply to hear his voice and be near him, to feel closer to him. "Since I have been in town for a long time, you might like to spend some time with me," Kate remarked, the soft evening breeze gently lifting her hair as she watched the lights of the surrounding houses dance over his eyes. "Like a date?" Mark inquired, his attention piqued. Sure, he might have received offers once he was rid of his ex-wife, however, they lacked Kate's strength and beauty. At least that's what he believed. "If you wish," Kate responded, her face flaming hot from her embarrassment at him using the word date. "Get a hold of yourself, Kate. You've gone on dates previously," she berated herself mentally. "Sure, when would you prefer to go out?" Mark inquired, feeling like he was 14 again as he asked the first girl to ever go out with him. "I heard there's an orchestra playing tomorrow night," and she stepped closer to him so he could feel the heat of her body and smell her faint scent. "How about you pick me up at 7? Kate inquired, her left hand gently extending out, lightly caressing his before slipping into his. "Sure, where are you staying?" "Do you remember where my parents were?" Kate inquired, taking advantage of the opportunity to close the final space between them. Of course, Mark nodded. "Good," Kate murmured, a smile spreading across her face. "I cannot wait," she whispered as her cheek touched his. Her lips brushed delicately against his ear as she revealed her private number which few people possessed. 40 minutes later, Kate giggled. As she slid down onto her old bed, her right hand lay on her heart, feeling how quickly it beat. She could not believe how wonderfully it went. She felt certain that Mark would have said no. Her legs kicked in the air, causing her jeans to tighten against her backside. "Kate, what's got you all so excited?" her mother inquired as she stood in her daughter's former bedroom. "I have got a date," Kate said it eagerly as she danced in place. She smiled, glad to see her daughter so happy. She understood how terrible the years had been for her, and like any mother, she wanted her daughter to be happy. And just who is the lucky guy? "Mark," Kate spoke dreamily, unaware of her mother's expression. "I want you to stay away from that man. He's broken things," her mother spoke harshly. "Who do you think you are talking to?" Kate spoke coldly. "She may be her mother, but nobody told her what to do. Who and what I spend my time on is my concern, not yours, mother." Kate, don't use that tone with me. That man just revealed your sister's dirty laundry to the entire family, so? Lisa brought it on herself, Mother. What did you imagine would happen when they asked him that? Do you not care that she lied to him and cheated him out of his life? He believed they were going to live happily ever after. Did you really expect him to jump up and down in agreement? Kate inquired, sliding into her CEO role. He could have been more tactful, her mother huffed and crossed her arms, and her graying dark brown hair bounced across her chest. Do you realize how hurt your sister was? Whatever anguish she endured, I'm sure it was nothing compared to the 4 years she lied to him before ultimately receiving what she deserved, Kate commented, crossing her arms and confronting her mother. I do not approve. It is not up to you to make the decision. If you want to waste your time with him. She threw her arms in the air as she marched out of her daughter's room. Music from her teenage years played gently in the background. Her hips swayed as her fingertips danced around the top of the sewing machine that had sparked her business. Staring out the window of her room, she allowed her thoughts to travel down the path of the unknown future. She hoped they would have one together. Kate was willing to make things work between them, something her sister never was. She knew Lisa well enough to recognize that all she cared about was his money, not the man who earned that money. A little smile spread across her lips as she rested her hands on her stomach, thinking about what it would be like to bear their child, to hear the pitter-patter of small feet running around her luxury condo, to see Mark chasing their child around as his or her contagious laughter filled the house. To sigh and throw her arms around herself, she couldn't wait until tomorrow night. Mark awoke at about 7:30, his hand pressed down on his alarm. He had forgotten to turn it off when he went to bed last night, so he rolled over and pulled his sheet back up. He didn't have to deal with making calls and such, that was his plan, until a knock came at his door, and he bolted up just as another knock. Throwing off his covers, wondering who would come over at such an early hour, he snatched his robe off the hook on the back of the door, pulling it across his bare chest and tying a loose knot in the belt to hide his boxers. He wasn't about to get completely dressed in order to tell someone off and go back to bed. Mark's voice died in his throat as he yanked open the front door. He wasn't expecting to see Kate standing at his door, yet he wasn't surprised to discover such a lovely woman on his doorstep. Her rich walnut-colored hair was pulled up and tightened into a ponytail with a single curl hanging down her face, appearing to have tenderly kissed her cheek. Her beautiful blue eyes sparkled as she looked kindly at him. Kate wore little makeup, she didn't need it, and neither did his confused mind. She did not need to. His eyes involuntarily moved down the teal ruffle backless neck-knitted winter sweater, noting how it clung closely to her chest. He took a dry sip and felt his Adam's apple bob as his brown eyes rested upon her thin hips, clutched tightly by her worn blue jeans. Closing his door slightly as the denim appeared to be painted on her toned thighs, he tried to conceal his emerging excitement from her gaze. His brain finally saw the bag she clutched at her side. "Morning, Mark," Kate spoke softly, her heart pounding in her chest. She didn't expect him to answer the door in just a robe. Her pulse hammered in her ears as she caught a glimpse of his naked chest. Was he naked? She groaned mentally. "Morning, I am not that I am pleased to see you, but why are you here so early?" Mark inquired, hiding his lower half behind the door. "I thought we could eat breakfast together," Kate remarked, bringing out a bag from the neighborhood bakery. "Unless you want not to." Her statements were tinged with grief as she felt she had moved too quickly. "Of course I do. Just let me put on some clothes," Mark remarked, smiling at her. "Really?" Kate's head shot up. Joy danced along with her lovely eyes as he spoke. "I have everything set up out here so we can enjoy eating in the morning sun." Her smile reached from ear to ear. "I'll be as soon as I can," Mark responded, his pulse racing. It had been a long time since someone made him feel this way. The flutter and the exhilaration you get when you have a connection with someone but you don't know what it is. Nonetheless, you're intrigued to see where it goes and how far that emotion would take you down that dark rabbit hole. What twists and turns would await you on that weird and hopefully joyful voyage to a place only fate could predict. Dashing into his room, his clothing flew out of his drawers as he looked for something to wear for breakfast. For some reason, he wanted to appear nice rather than disheveled and haggard like he did when he first rolled out of bed. Brushing his comb through his hair and softly showering himself with his favorite fragrance, Mark wanted Kate to enjoy the morning. She did, after all, travel all this way to visit him. Kate sat enthusiastically in her chair. She had set up the table on his porch to make it as personal as possible while enjoying quants, fresh fruit, cream cheese, and 2 bottles of orange juice. Her blood pounded in her ears as she heard the doorknob turn. Her nose flared as she caught the aroma of his perfume in the wind. She felt her mind go blank as Mark went out onto the porch, his lips forming a pleasant grin as he carefully pulled out the patio chair. "I hope I didn't make you wait, Kate," Mark replied as he fell into the seat, not clearing his throat as he noticed himself stammering. "Not at all," Kate said, hoping he wouldn't notice how much her cheeks burned. "I hope you enjoy what I bought for us," she remarked, waving her hand over the goods. "I believe I will. Yet the companionship adds to the overall enjoyment of the meal," Mark whispered, observing Kate's cheeks rapidly becoming warm. "My," Kate mumbled something behind her hand which hit her shaking lips. "Shall we?" Mark asked. He was concerned that his covert flirtations would be unwelcome, but Kate appeared to relish them. "So, Kate, what have you been doing over the last few years? Last I heard you left for New York a year into your college career," he added, as he broke open the croissant. Kate's ears icked up. His hands had occupied her thoughts and eyes, observing the delicate way he held the flaky pastry, and wondering if he would hold her with the same gentleness if or when her body pressed against his. "I sort of operate a women's clothing brand," Kate mumbled, her solitary bangs flowing before her as she fiddled with her own croissant, quivering as she felt and saw his palm covering hers. "That is wonderful." Her parents never praised her accomplishments. To them, she was always the strange, silent child they had nurtured. She was not the strong, powerful owner of her own multi-million-dollar firm that she had matured into. It wasn't as if she could find fault with her parents. All parents were like that, or so she thought. Still, seeing Mark laud her meant everything to her. His hand stayed on hers, sending a comforting warmth throughout her body. "Thank you," Kate said quietly, rolling her palm over her fingertips and softly playing along his wrist, feeling how his pulse raced, secretly thrilled that she had the same effect on him as he had on her. "So, what have you been doing since leaving my sister? Are there any women I should be careful of?" she inquired with a mischievous smirk. "Have there been any offers?" "Sure. Did I take up their offers? Not for a million years. I understand Lisa's actions are difficult to forgive, no matter how much everyone is urging you to let go," Kate stated, her thumb brushing across his knuckles. "Who knows? If I play my cards well, I could convince you to come to New York to visit me," she replied hesitantly, stroking and brushing behind her ear. "Perhaps," Mark nodded. Mark was uncertain about the direction of this conversation, however. He was keen to see this through. Laughter permeated the air as Kate and Mark talked about their breakfast. She loved how his eyes never left her as she told him about her years in New York, and how they enjoyed their peaceful supper together, as if it were just the two of them. How she imagined it would feel if her sister hadn't kept him to herself. So, what could she do? Lisa was always self-centered as they grew up. Her miscalculation, however, worked to her advantage. Kate could now show him how a woman should treat the guy she loves. However, like all wonderful things, it had to come to an end. The last drop of orange juice, along with the cheese and fruit, had vanished. How she just wanted to spend the day with him. Groaning because she knew it would appear too needy, that was something Mark did not require at the moment. He needed to know that she was not like her sister, and would never do to him what Lisa had done. Her gaze shifted to the right, where she noticed Jane's car approaching the curb, knowing that now was the moment to leave. Plus, she believed that this would increase Mark's desire for her. "Well, it appears you have company," Kate responded cheerfully, seeing how his eyes hardened as he glanced at his sister's automobile. "No, you do not." "I'd love to remain, Mark, but a female has to stay mysterious," Kate remarked, giving him a seductive look. How that sincere smile warmed her heart. "Plus, I have a spa appointment and want to look my best for tonight," she explained, pulling her chair back as Jane exited her car. "Kate, even if it was only a towel, I'm confident you'd make it look amazing." Mark said this as he stood up to accompany her to her car. Kate was at a loss for words. It was unusual for someone to leave her speechless. Her thoughts were so jumbled that she didn't see them standing at the door of her rental car with Jane standing a few yards away, trying not to step between them. "Thank you for breakfast with me. Thank you for bringing it," Mark answered cheerfully. "You are welcome to come over at any time," she murmured, dragging him closer to her, nibbling her lip as his hand rested on her left hip. "That would be tremendously enjoyable," she whispered, and then embraced him with her silky, soft lips as she took her first bite of the man she had been romantically involved with for the past 5 years. Her fingertips brushed against his waist, and her arms curled around his torso. She felt his tongue glide into her lips. Her lips touched his as they tasted each other. Her hands went up his back, and her claws scratched against his shirt as she lost herself in the kiss. Her chest rose quickly. Her breath was thick as she drew away. She was clearly panting after their kiss. "I'll see you tonight," Kate said as her hand groped about for the door lock. "I can't wait," Mark responded with a seductive smile, waving to her as she drove out of his driveway, watching her car fade into the distance and wondering how tonight would go. "Mark, can we speak?" Jane inquired from behind him. "What about?" Mark sighed. He assumed they'd said everything they needed to say last night. "Please, Mark, look at me," Jane said as her feet glided down the smooth blades of grass. "Isn't it appropriate for you to be at work?" Mark inquired as he turned to face his sister. "Dad gave me a couple of hours off so we can chat." "It's just us, no one else," Jane said. When he wasn't busy diverting her attention from the monotonous chore of keeping the company's record straight, ensuring that their employees, vendors, and every penny from their contracts were in their accounts, she missed the hours they would spend at her desk. "Do you want to talk?" "Fine. Do not expect me to reciprocate," Mark replied, strolling back to his house, knowing it would require a thorough cleaning before he could invite Kate over. He didn't want her to see how bad things had gotten, so he entered his house with his sister at his back. "I'm all right with chatting as long as you listen, little brother," Jane stated angrily. She understood how difficult it was to deal with an unfaithful husband. She and Mark had gone through a hard stretch a few years ago. They hadn't been intimate in quite some time. Raising Matt and Debbie took a toll on them. Mark had left his phone behind one day, and as a good watchful wife, she knew his PIN code even though he didn't believe she did. So, as she cleaned the house, she heard his phone ding, and his texts began to stream in. Her curiosity had gotten the better of her. She wished she hadn't taken up his phone. She sobbed into her pillow as she read the texts he was sending to a lady, which he acknowledged. She called him out on it right now, but it only got as far as messages. She felt deceived by it. It took a long time for her to regain faith in him, and she spent many hours in couples counseling. They worked through it, though she still had her reservations. Still, that was nothing compared to what her brother had witnessed. She was astounded by his self-control, which he had demonstrated that day. Jane wasn't sure if she could be that restrained if she had walked in on Matt, hilt deep into a woman on their bed. Yeah, Mark muttered as he entered his kitchen to retrieve some trash bags. "Do you ever air this house out?" Jane inquired, opening the living room window. "No. Okay, I see you're getting along with Kate." "I'm glad someone can make you smile again," Jane murmured, turning as she heard her brother enter the room. "Yeah, what about it?" Mark inquired indifferently. The bag rustled as he began stuffing it with bottles from his coffee table. "Nothing, Mark, I'm just happy to see you smiling again," Jane expressed her happiness as she assisted him in organizing his living room. She was relieved to see her brother emerge from the dark hole he had fallen into over the previous year. She knew that no matter what she said, it would never be enough to ease her pain. It was something only time could fix. She just wanted him to know that they were there for him, no matter what it took. Jane yearned for the chance to participate in his life instead of feeling excluded for the previous year. "So, have I heard anything about a date?" Jane inquired coyly and lightly giggling as she noticed her brother blush. She hadn't seen him blush like that since he was 13, when the neighbor girl who lived in the house to their left gave him his first kiss. "I'm glad you're finally leaving this house," she said, nodding her head. His living room looked presentable once again. "Mark, why is there so much junk in this room?" Jane inquired, perplexed as she stood at the doorway leading to the master bedroom. "I converted it into a storage room after that day," Mark stated as he went out the door holding the full bag. "Why are you not using it?" She stopped herself after he shot her a glance as he walked back inside. "Right, I probably wouldn't want to sleep in the same room if Matt did that," she added as she shut the door. "So why haven't you relocated if you can't take living here? Have you seen the market recently? If I sold this house right now, I'd definitely receive less than half of what I paid for it." I'm definitely not a landlord, Mark explained as he pushed past his sister to handle the kitchen. So how about we have a double date? Jane inquired as she entered the room. Do what? Mark inquired, gazing at his sister as if she had grown a second head. What? Jane huffed. Her hands lay on her hips. I would want to know what this would not waste your time with this man. He's a lost cause. So what about a double date with me and Matt? Jane asked again, this time with a determined look on her face. A double date? Mark repeated, trying to wrap his head around the idea. Yes, a double date. I want to know what Kate's intentions are with you. I'm not about to allow another woman to hurt you, Jane said firmly. Mark sighed. Fine, we can have a double date, but if it goes south, don't say I didn't warn you. Great! Jane beamed, giving her brother a quick hug. I'll set it up. The following day, Mark's vehicle door closed as he arrived at Kate's parents' house at 6:50 that night. Looking in the rearview mirror, he noticed the blanket and picnic basket. He hoped Kate liked what he had brought over. While he had a bottle of wine, he wouldn't drink more than 2 glasses because he was driving. Hoping to find the ideal location on the lawn to enjoy the music and each other's company, that was how Mark hoped the night would go. As he moved towards the front entrance, he tugged on the lapels of his black suit jacket and placed his deep blue dress shirt tightly against his chest. His dress clothes were pristine and clean, and the shine on his dress shoes glistened in the porch light. Mark wanted Kate to remember this night vividly. He was unsure if it would go any further because she lived in New York. Nonetheless, he might make this night memorable. He exhaled deeply before grasping the door with his knuckles. Yes? Kate's father answered the door saying, It's you. You have some nerve, he sneered. Rick, I have no idea what you are talking about, Mark spoke indifferently. You are well aware of what you have done, Rick gave a snarl. Take it off, Dad. Kate's voice wafted towards him from somewhere deep inside her childhood house. Don't be furious with Mark because Lisa can't shut her legs. Kate, I won't let you talk like that in my house, Rick let out a bark. So I think I'll stay somewhere else. Kate described how her rich walnut-colored hair bounced on her shoulders as she stepped around the corner of the corridor, her pale blue eyes clustering as Mark glanced over her father's shoulder. She seldom wore her contacts. This was one of those evenings. The diamonds and rubies on her earrings and necklace glittered when light touched the gem surface. Well, if you want to risk your life for this man, Rick twisted his lips as he looked at Mark. Then it's up to you, Rick exclaimed, striding out of the doorway. Mark was at a loss for words as Kate stood in front of him in a gray low-cut scoop neck, narrow-fit knitted dress that hugged all the right contours, revealing the outline of appealing shapely hips before halting mid-thigh. Her manicured toes and their glossy nail polish peeked from her open-toe lace-up stiletto heels. Her soft, alluring perfume entered his nose, lulling him into stormy waters, and the phrase slipped his lips as his thoughts were dazzled by her beauty. Do you like it? Kate inquired with a sensual smile, touching her lips as she performed a small spin for him. Kate, you look great, Mark replied. And you look... Her heart was fluttering as her gaze traveled down his torso. Kate purred with desire. Shall we go? Mark inquired, moving back to his left and extending out his right arm to her. Yes. Her fingertips danced over the nook in his elbow. Kate smiled sweetly at him as she gently laid her hand on his arm and closed the door behind her. As they moved towards Mark's car, her hips swung seductively. She could not believe what was occurring. She had always imagined this would happen. Kate was overjoyed that it was finally happening. Her ruby-painted lips grinned up at him as she climbed into the passenger seat. She wanted him to understand how much she wanted their new relationship to succeed, to be by his side when they are both elderly and gray. She pulled out her phone, knowing that her flight was in a few days. She couldn't be away for much longer, booking a hotel room, since her parents were being stubborn about organizing her next return trip, because this was merely the beginning. Kate stepped to the side as Mark laid out the blanket for them while the orchestra began to prepare for tonight's performance. Thank you, Kate murmured gently, grinning as her cupped palm scooped crumbs from the crackers she was munching on. A piece of creamy, thick cheese watching the evening sun play across his face while music played in the background. She had almost forgotten about the other individuals who had come to watch the show with her as the breeze drifted gently across the grassy knoll. It felt like they were the only ones in the world at the time. She rested her head on Mark's right shoulder as the first stars of the night appeared on the black velvet curtain, snuggling close to him as they watched the band perform. Once they had departed, Mark drove to replace her, and as they approached the home, Kate stated, "I have to fly back to New York in 2 days. I want this to work, Mark. I want you to know that I am the only one you will ever need. I hope you want it too. However, considering what my sister did, I understand that it will take some time for you, so should we take it one day at a time?" "Are you asking someone out?" Mark inquired with a faint smile on his lips. "Yep," Kate hummed and nodded fervently. Going out with a stunning woman. As Kate waited for Mark's response, he grinned internally at her thrilled and shy expression. "I'd be foolish to say no," Mark said. "Mark!" Kate shrieked and put her arms around him. "You don't know how long I've been waiting to hear those words." She sighed contentedly as she hugged him close. "Don't you mind if we eat breakfast again?" she inquired as Mark opened the passenger door for her. "I'd love to," Mark remarked, grinning down at her and offering his hand to her. "I had hoped you'd say that," Kate replied, hooking her arm around his as he led her to the front door of her parents' house. She exhaled happily. "I really enjoyed tonight, Mark. So did I. I hope you're ready for this, Mom, because what I have now will surely be enough," Kate groaned when her mother waited in the doorway. "Do you have an idea what time it is? I was worried sick," her mother exclaimed. "I am 23, not a tiny kid," Kate huffed as her mother hauled her inside the home. "Can I call you Mark?" she yelled as her father took her further inside the home. "I believe you should be heading home." Her harsh eyes hardened as she shut the door in Mark's face. The day before Thanksgiving, Mark's connection with Kate had been progressively improving over the last few weeks. He also made a detour to New York after his unplanned sales trip a week earlier. How he felt like a teenager as Kate waited at the departure gate. He had spent 2 days in that metropolis before going home. However, those 2 days were fantastic. Kate had shown him around the city, including her company's offices. He had to admit to some of the items she had shown him. He pondered how they would appear on her physique. He simply appreciated her company. Everything she mentioned was right. He wasn't prepared for sex yet, not after what her sister had done to him. Mark wanted to be in the correct state of mind when they continued their relationship. He did not want to rush things with her. He wanted this to succeed, even if it meant taking a red-eye flight to New York to see her. Mark was relaxing on his couch watching television. He would sheepishly look at his phone. He contacted her a few hours earlier, but she hadn't responded back, and he didn't want to come off as clingy. That never looked well in the early stages of a relationship. He was still a bit nervous. If she was busy, she usually texted him back within an hour. As he heard a knock on his door, he quickly sat up. Mark was not expecting anyone. Sure, his parents and sister had been lighting up his phone, asking him if he was coming over to their house tomorrow, which he swiftly ignored. His jaw fell in amazement as the door flung wide, revealing Kate standing on his doorstep with her luggage by her feet. "Mark!" Kate exclaimed joyfully as she wrapped her arms around his neck, laying a long-awaited kiss on his lips. She'd been longing to do that throughout the journey. "I like that expression," she added with a huge smile as she moved back. "Why haven't you called?" "I would have come to get you," Mark stated. "I was quite thrilled to see her." "I wanted it to be a surprise," Kate murmured shyly, pressing the toe of her shoe on the threshold of the doorway while placing her hands behind her. "And by the expression on your face, you were." She smiled again as she spoke. "Of course I was. Why shouldn't I be?" Mark replied, enveloping her in another tight hug and enjoying her aroma. He nuzzled her neck, feeling how she laid her cheek against his chest, groaning as she clung to him closely. Kate had missed being in his arms since he left New York. Every time she felt his body against hers, her mind drifted to their future. She hadn't told him that she had already bought a ticket for him to visit her during Christmas. If everything went well with his family, she might let him know, but if it didn't, she had no problem coming to visit him and bringing her own family along. "I wasn't sure you'd come," Mark stated, brushing his nose into her ear and feeling the heat of her lips as they turned up. "Mom may not like you, but she does respect me. When I told her that I was coming back to see you, she didn't like it. But she's not going to stop me," Kate explained, brushing her hand along his jawline. "I can't stay long, but I'd rather spend time with you than her," she murmured, stroking her lips softly against his, curling her toes as his hands slipped around her waist. "Do you have a place to stay?" Mark inquired, nibbling her ear and hearing her hum. I have a hotel room booked. I hope to spend some time with you, Kate explained, pushing the door behind her closed. But if you want me to stay the night, I wouldn't mind either. Mark's voice softened as he brushed her lips. I'd love that. Kate's heart soared. He felt her body quiver as she whispered sweet nothings in her ear. Their romance had progressed slowly, but that's what she wanted. Well, if you're serious about spending Christmas with me in New York, I have your ticket booked and ready to go, she said, her hands clutching his shoulders. Mark's eyes widened. You do? Yes, I do. I'm not going to let you spend Christmas alone, she said softly, her hands running along his back. So what do you say? I say yes, Mark grinned as his fingers gently stroked her cheek, and they sealed their agreement with another kiss. On Thanksgiving morning, Mark awoke to the warmth of Kate's body nestled against his. He smiled, feeling her soft breaths on his chest. He felt lucky to have her. Kate stirred as the sunlight peeked through the curtains, and she opened her eyes to find Mark staring at her lovingly. Good morning, Kate whispered, her voice still husky with sleep. Good morning, beautiful, Mark replied, kissing her forehead. Ready to face your family today? She asked, knowing it was a sensitive topic for him. Honestly, I'm nervous, but with you by my side, I think I can handle it, Mark admitted, his hand gently rubbing her back. Then let's go show them what they've been missing, Kate said confidently, kissing him deeply before getting up to prepare for the day. Mark and Kate arrived at his parents' house, hand in hand. As they walked up to the door, Mark felt a mixture of anxiety and determination. He knocked, and his mother answered, her eyes widening in surprise at the sight of Kate. Hello, Mom, Mark greeted, his voice steady. This is Kate. Hello, Mrs. Turner, Kate said politely, extending her hand. Mrs. Turner hesitated for a moment before shaking Kate's hand. Hello, Kate. Please come in. Inside, the atmosphere was tense but cordial. Mark's father and siblings greeted him with a mixture of surprise and caution. The meal began with small talk, and gradually the conversation became more comfortable. As the dinner progressed, Kate's presence seemed to diffuse the tension. She charmed Mark's family with her wit and genuine interest in them. By the time dessert was served, the mood had lightened considerably. After dinner, as the family gathered in the living room, Mark took a deep breath and addressed them. I know the past year has been tough for all of us, he began, his voice strong. But I want you to know that I'm moving on. Kate has been a big part of that, and I'm grateful to have her in my life. There was a moment of silence before his father spoke. We're glad to see you happy, Mark. It's been a long road, but it's good to see you smiling again. Mark nodded, feeling a weight lift off his shoulders. He looked at Kate, who gave him a reassuring smile. The evening ended on a positive note, with Mark feeling a sense of closure. As he and Kate left his parents' house, he felt hopeful for the first time in a long while. I couldn't have done this without you, Mark said as they walked to the car. Kate squeezed his hand. I'll always be here for you, Mark, no matter what. As they drove away, Mark knew that with Kate by his side, he could face anything that came his way. And for the first time in a long time, he felt truly happy. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more intense tales of betrayal and revenge. What would you do if you found out your partner was cheating? Let us know in the comments below. See you in the next video.